Welcome to the Nation of History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. In 1968, the city of Prague was the stage for a major social movement. Thousands of people gathered to demand political change and greater freedom. This period became known as the Prague Spring. In 1895 in Paris, an express train overran the stopping point at the Gare Montparnasse station. After crossing more than about 98 feet of the concourse, it plunged through the facade window. The accident became one of the most iconic railway images in history. The iconic photograph World's Highest Standard of Living, taken by Margaret Bourke White in 1937, shows Black Americans lined up for aid after floods in Louisville, Kentucky. In the background, a billboard displays a smiling white family with the words, "There's no way like the American way." During an official visit in 1972, Dutch soldiers took part in the reception ceremonies for the President of Finland, Urho Kekkonen. The event took place amid stable diplomatic relations between the two countries. Military participation was common in protocol events of this kind. The slums of Glasgow in 1868. The city grew rapidly with the Industrial Revolution, but without adequate infrastructure. Thousands of people lived in cramped housing. A test pilot managed to eject at the right moment before the aircraft lost altitude. The scene took place in 1961 during a test flight monitored by technical teams. This type of procedure was essential to evaluate safety systems in experimental aircraft. British soldiers said goodbye before departing from Victoria Station in London in 1914. They were boarding to serve in operations outside the country during a major international conflict. The image shows the atmosphere of expectation and emotion of that historic moment. The five Dion sisters posed together for a portrait in New York in 1950. They were the first known set of quintuplets to survive childhood. Born in Canada in 1934, they became a symbol of worldwide public curiosity. In 1955, a man became famous for being called the heaviest in Europe. At the time, his routine and lifestyle drew attention in newspapers and public fairs. This title reflected society's interest in people considered extraordinary. Robert Wadlow has been recorded as the tallest person in modern history. In 1940, he measured an impressive 2.72 meters in height, about 8 feet 11 inches. His growth was caused by a condition that affected hormone production. Erika Seals, a young Hungarian revolutionary, was photographed on November 1, 1956, during the Hungarian Revolution. The uprising was a popular movement against the communist regime and Soviet influence. The image became a symbol of the fight for freedom. Brigitte Bardot posed in 1958 during the height of her career in film and fashion. Considered a cultural icon of France, she influenced generations with her striking style. At that time, Bardot was already recognized internationally for her work and image. A simple Christmas dinner in 1936, during times of economic hardship. The menu included potatoes, cabbage, and pie as the main course. Even with few ingredients, the Christmas spirit remained present. Auto polo was a sport created in the United States in 1913. It was played with small cars and mallets, inspired by traditional polo. Despite its spectacle, it was abandoned because it was considered dangerous for participants. It shows an automobile that collided with a safety barrier, creating an unusual scene. The image became famous as an example of curious accidents recorded in the early decades of the 20th century. In 1945, during the last months of the Second World War, residents of Berlin helped care for the animals at the city zoo. Even amid extreme hardship, many tried to provide food and shelter for the animals. In the 1940s, child car seats had simple metal frames. They were used mainly to keep children elevated and entertained, not for safety. Over time, the designs evolved to focus on protection during travel. A crowd watched a solar eclipse in Paris, France, in April 1912. People used dark plates or photographic film to protect their eyes. This astronomical phenomenon drew great public and scientific attention at the time. Leg prostheses in the Victorian period were made of wood, leather, and metals. In 1890, articulated models allowed a certain level of mobility. These innovations marked the beginning of the modern evolution of prosthetics. In Milan in 1953, an Italian man kissed a portrait of Joseph Stalin after his death on March 6th. The scene reflects the emotional impact the Soviet leader had on supporters around the world. The gesture symbolizes mourning, reverence, and ideology. A United States Marine tore a portrait of Stalin after the liberation of Seoul from North Korean communist forces. The scene, recorded in the early 1950s during the Korean War, symbolizes the intense ideological antagonism of the era. The former Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong was famous for the complexity of its approach. Located in the middle of the city, it required pilots to make a 45-degree turn shortly before landing. The path close to buildings made every touchdown a precise and risky maneuver. Control room of the German submarine SM UB-110 in 1918. Equipped with analog instruments and manual valves, the space was cramped and demanded absolute precision from its operators. This class of submarines was used intensively by Germany during the First World War. Annette Kellerman posed in a one-piece swimsuit in 1907 in the United States. At the time, tighter women's swimwear was uncommon and considered improper. She was detained for wearing the garment, but she helped popularize more practical clothing for swimmers. A demonstration held in 1968 presented innovations such as the computer mouse and a graphical interface to the public. The event also showed features like windows, linked text, and document editing. It was led by Douglas Engelbart and became a milestone in the history of modern computing. In 1922, Albert Einstein was photographed while explaining his revolutionary theory of relativity. With expressive gestures and a blackboard behind him, he translated complex concepts for an audience increasingly fascinated by science. This moment records the global impact of his ideas in the 20th century. A symbolic greeting between a Soviet pilot from the Night Witches and an American soldier marked the meeting of the Allied forces at the Elbe River in 1945. The scene represented the beginning of the end of the Second World War in Europe. The union between the armies symbolized cooperation amid devastation. Sybil Shepherd, a symbol of charm and style in the 1970s, stood out in both film and fashion. With her classic beauty and confident attitude, she became a cultural icon of the era. Her talent and presence marked the beginning of a long-lasting career. Alexander Graham Bell took part in the opening of the long-distance telephone line between New York and Chicago in 1892. This moment marked an important advance in communication, connecting distant cities by voice. The construction of the LZ-127 Graf Zeppelin in Friedrichshafen, Germany, took place in 1928. It was one of the largest and most famous airships ever built, about 236 meters long, approximately 774 feet. Designed for long-distance flights, the Graf Zeppelin crossed oceans and made more than 140 journeys around the world. Tourists visited the plastic House of the Future on display at Disneyland, California in 1958. The project was created in partnership with Monsanto to show how families might live in the future. The house included modern technologies such as a microwave oven and a touch-tone telephone. Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna posed beside her daughters in 1910 in Imperial Russia. She was the wife of Emperor Nicholas II and the mother of the Grand Duchesses Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. She was the wife of Emperor Nicholas II and the mother of the Grand Duchesses Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. The Kuba Comet was a home entertainment system manufactured in West Germany between 1957 and 1962. It featured a swiveling television on top and built-in speakers in the base. Its futuristic and imposing design made it a standout item of the television era. Madison Square Garden in New York City was transformed into an indoor swimming pool during the summer of 1921. The idea offered a refreshing alternative in the hottest months. The venue was used for many events and adaptations, showing its versatility. The Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library in the United States was recorded around 1874. The building stood out for its elaborate architecture with spiral staircases, a glass roof, and cast-iron alcoves that housed the books. The Cocknoe stone was discovered in 1887 near Clydebank, Scotland. It contains Bronze Age carvings such as spirals and circles. It is considered one of the largest rock art surfaces in Europe. A very tall man was photographed next to his father in a special moment. The image shows the difference in height between the two, highlighting a rare growth condition. A photograph taken in 1860 shows the Pantheon, one of Rome's oldest and best-preserved buildings. Built in the 2nd century, the temple is known for its dome with a central opening. Today, the site still draws visitors from around the world for its impressive architecture. John Quincy Adams in 1843, at 76 years of age. He was the 6th President of the United States, serving from 1825 to 1829. Besides being a politician, he also worked as a lawyer, diplomat, and diarist throughout his life. Harriet Tubman in 1911, already elderly. She was an important social activist in the United States. Tubman helped many people achieve freedom. Her work continues to be remembered as a symbol of courage and justice. Photographer Margaret Bourke-White is seen in 1935 standing at the top of a building to capture an aerial image. She was one of the first women to work as an international correspondent and gained prominence for her courage. Elvis Presley performed at the International Hotel in Las Vegas in 1969. This return marked his first major live engagement after years devoted to film. The season was a huge success and relaunched his stage career. President Jimmy Carter appeared beside the musical group the Bee Gees in the 1970s. The band was one of the most popular of the decade, known for the disco style. This meeting symbolizes the strong presence of pop culture in the politics of the time. Vinkas Juska became known for transporting Lithuanian books in the late 1800s. He helped preserve the country's language and culture during times of repression. These actions were essential to keep local traditions alive. In 1978, Prince Charles, heir to the throne of the United Kingdom, took part in a cultural event in Rio de Janeiro. During the celebration at Palácio da Cidade, he danced with a Brazilian samba performer. The visit was part of an official tour of South America. The three-eyed TV monster, created by Ulysses Sanabria in 1961, was an experimental television that allowed simultaneous viewing on 2 or 3 screens. The unusual design sought to explore new forms of entertainment and multiple transmission. A human chess match was held in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, in 1924. People represented the pieces on a giant board set up outdoors. The event combined sport, art, and entertainment, drawing a large audience. The young inventor H. Day, 18 years old, was photographed in 1922 wearing a portable radio hidden under his top hat. He connected headphones to the device to listen to broadcasts. In 1859, the Niagara Suspension Bridge connected the United States to Canada. In addition to trains and carriages, there was an inner passage for pedestrians. It was one of the first bridges to combine rail traffic with foot traffic. Divers prepared for an underwater activity in 1935. At the time, the equipment was large and heavy, with metal helmets. These suits protected users during underwater explorations. Robert T. Lincoln, son of former President Abraham Lincoln, attended the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial. At the time, he was 78 years old and needed assistance to climb the steps of the monument in Washington, District of Columbia. The City Hall Post Office building in New York City was completed in 1880. It served as the headquarters for the Postal Service and public offices for several decades. It was demolished in 1939 to make way for new urban projects. A woman tried a new model of tricycle in 1882. The scene was recorded by the photographer Chaz WWII. This type of vehicle was popular among women of the time because it was stable and elegant. A bread delivery man moved through the streets of an Italian city in 1957. He carried dozens of loaves carefully stacked on his head. The image shows local tradition and the skill involved in this method of delivery. Before computers, airline reservations were made manually. Employees used large boards with files and cards organized by flights and dates. This process required great attention and was common in airlines until the 1960s. A funny knees contest was held in England in 1953. Events like this were popular at seaside resorts. They celebrated British humor and holiday fun. A curious engineless car was photographed in Paris in 1950. Its design resembles the vehicle of the character Fred Flintstone from the famous cartoon. The image shows the creativity and humor found in some automobiles of the period. A rabbit race was held in Los Angeles in 1930. This kind of event served as entertainment and as a popular curiosity. It shows how unusual competitions attracted public attention at that time. Al Pacino as a few months old infant in a family photo taken in 1940. He was born in New York City in the Bronx that same year. Decades later, he would become one of the most renowned actors in film. A photographer from Sweden recorded scenes of daily life in the streets of Spain during the Franco period. These images show aspects of life under strong political and social control. The work remains without identified authorship, but has significant historical value. People enjoyed the sun during June 1922. The scene shows a moment of outdoor leisure on a clear and calm day. Images like this help illustrate the lifestyle and clothing of the era. Waterloo Place in London in 1899 had heavy movement of pedestrians and carriages. The area connected important city streets and was surrounded by Victorian architecture. Statues and historic monuments made the location a notable point in the English capital. A sea of hats in New York City in 1939. The fashion of the era meant that almost all men wore hats every day. The image shows an elegant crowd on a busy city street. An Italian ice cream vendor served children in 1877. He carried a wooden box of ice creams and a small bell to attract attention. Vendors like this were common in the streets of Europe in the late 19th century. Three women posed for a photograph in Marshall, Texas in 1899. The city was an important cultural and educational center of the southern United States. The image shows the typical clothing of the time and the photographic style of the late 19th century. Three sisters posed together for a photo taken nearly a century ago. The image shows clothing and hairstyles typical of the early 20th century. Family portraits were important records of the time. A group of children played in the streets of Mischief, France, in 1934. The period between the wars was marked by simplicity and imagination in play. Even with few resources, childhood remained full of curiosity. A woman wears a traditional kokoshnik in Russia at the beginning of the 20th century. The kokoshnik is a headpiece used on special occasions such as weddings and festivals. Made with embroidery and beads, it symbolizes elegance and Russian cultural heritage. A store specializing in clothing for overweight men in New York during the 1950s. The sign read, "Fat Men's Shop," reflecting the language of the time. It was an example of a niche market serving specific needs. Winston Churchill enjoyed a leisurely swim, far from the political pressures that marked his career. Known for his determined personality, he also valued strategic breaks to recover his energy. It is a rare glimpse into his personal life. During 1951 and 1952, one of the most emblematic buildings of the Soviet period rose, Moscow State University. With monumental architecture and the influence of Stalinist style, the construction symbolized the power and prestige of education in the Soviet Union. It became one of the Seven Sisters skyscrapers. In March 1969, months before his historic trip to the moon, Neil Armstrong was photographed in a relaxed moment, making pizza for his family. At home in Houston, the astronaut enjoyed his last moments of domestic routine before making history with the Apollo 11 mission. In 1943, during the Second World War, Leonid Brezhnev served as a political commissar in the Red Army on the Eastern Front. He was responsible for troop morale. Decades later, he would become the leader of the Soviet Union. In the 1950s, a woman posed beside a giant coast redwood. These trees, native to California, are among the tallest in the world. The image highlights the grandeur of nature in contrast with the human figure. In 1889, Anna Bissell became the chief executive officer of the Bissell Carpet Sweeper Company, the first woman in the United States to hold that position. She expanded the company globally and protected its innovations with patents. Her legacy opened the door for women in corporate leadership. Frida Kahlo at 5 years old in 1912. Born in Mexico City, she would become one of the most important artists of the 20th century. Even as a child, she already showed a striking gaze and a strong personality. The enormous dollhouse of Queen Mary, wife of King George V, was being packed for transport. Created with remarkable detail, it was sent to Windsor Castle in 1923. It is considered one of the most elaborate ever made. Men used long poles with nets to collect balls on a golf course. The image was made in the 1920s, when the sport was gaining popularity. At the time, there were no machines for this task, so everything was done by hand. Children took part in an outdoor swimming class, wearing clothing of the time. The scene shows an instructor teaching basic techniques in a safe setting. In the 1920s, classes like this were common at clubs and schools during the summer. A 1964 photo shows the facade of a Woolworth store in downtown Houston, Texas. These stores were known for selling everything from clothing to everyday items. The location was part of a large retail chain popular in many cities across the United States. Ronald Reagan, President of the United States in the 1980s, was photographed in an informal moment. Ronald Reagan, President of the United States in the 1980s, was photographed in an informal moment. The image became known for revealing his simple and approachable style outside the White House. Workers cleaned the vaults of the Henry VII Chapel at Westminster Abbey, London, in 1934. This chapel is one of the church's most important areas, known for its detailed architecture. Westminster Abbey has been used for centuries for royal ceremonies and historic commemorations. A woman was dressed with a crinoline in 1860. This metal framework was worn under dresses to create volume in the lower portion. The crinoline defined the fashion of the time and reflected the aesthetic standards of the Victorian era. The centipede was a huge balloon shaped like a centipede. It closed the traditional Macy's parade in New York in 1929. It was one of the first giant balloons used in the event, drawing the public's attention. Paul Winchell was an American performer known for voicing characters such as Tigger and Gargamel. Besides his television career, he was also an inventor. In 1963, he registered the patent for a functional artificial heart design. The Montenegrin student Chedomir Čupić was photographed smiling in 1942. He was part of the local resistance during the occupation in the Second World War period. The photo is known for its historical and symbolic impact, highlighting strength of spirit even in difficult times. Pablo Picasso made his first self-portrait at age 15 in 1896. His last was made in 1972 when he was 90 years old. During his life, he created about 50,000 works of art. Kurt Cobain played drums during 8th grade in 1981. Before becoming known in music, he already showed interest in sounds and instruments. This image shows a simple moment from the youth of a future prominent name in rock. Andrew Jackson, 1844. He was the 7th President of the United States, serving from 1829 to 1837. Before the presidency, he worked as a lawyer, a military leader, and an influential political figure. Raymond Burr and Gene Cooper in a scene from the series Perry Mason from 1957. The production was one of the biggest successes of American television at the time. The series focused on legal cases and investigations led by the lawyer Perry Mason. A member of Napoleon's army was recorded in 1815 wearing the typical uniform of the time. This period marked the end of the Napoleonic campaigns and political changes in Europe. The troops were known for discipline, strategy, and influence on military history. A scene recorded in California in 1960, a period marked by major social and cultural change. The decade became known for economic growth and the rise of civil rights movements. California also stood out as a center of innovation, fashion, and youth culture in the United States. Joseph Ratzinger in 1965. At the time, he was a young German theologian involved in the Second Vatican Council. Years later, he would become Pope Benedict XVI, leader of the Catholic Church from 2005 to 2013. In 1943, residents of Hornsey, London, faced material shortages. To help, the government encouraged the recycling of newspapers, glass, and cans. These items were reused in factories and production centers. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.